perfect. Yes. Okay. I think we're ready to begin the event. I'm going to give everyone just a couple maybe of seconds or a minute or so, so you can start connecting. Um, this is really important for you to take into account. We are going to be transmitting the event in English in YouTube, but if you want to watch it with simultaneous translation in Spanish, you can do it in the embassy's Facebook page. Just if you'd like to see the event in a different language from where you are right now, just know that we are going to be transmitting in both languages. Okay. Again, I'm going to be giving everyone a couple of seconds to get into the event. Please, the embassy team, let us know if we should wait or anything. So I'm just going to give everyone about 20 seconds or 30 before we begin the really interesting discussion that we have prepared. Okay. This event, just so you know, is one of a series of events that the U.S. Embassy in Colombia did in order to promote women directing documentaries. This was done throughout March, since March is considered Women's Month. So it was a really interesting initiative to promote and to share different documentaries that women have directed. And this is going to be one of these events. It's the last, if I'm not mistaken, since Women's Month is over, but it's still going to be a really interesting discussion. So I think we're going to begin right now. Again, embassy team, if there's anything we should take into account, please let us know. Okay, so this event, as I was saying, was organized by the U.S. Embassy in Bogotá, in Colombia, and it's a really interesting way to commemorate Women's Month, which is like the role of women, not just in film, but in documentaries, which is even more interesting, if you ask me, because we never think about this, no, about women directing documentaries. And this documentary specifically that we are going to discuss right now is very important to me, not just personally, but professionally as well. We are going to be discussing the role of women in healthcare. And we are going to be doing this in a very interesting way, because this documentary that we are going to talk about is about nurses, which is a really interesting actor, also universal. So it doesn't matter if we're going to be talking about the US healthcare system. We, as Colombians, for example, are going to recognize a lot of the dynamics that are going on in the US with this actor. And we're also going to talk about a very specific part of the healthcare system, which is the emergency departments, urgencias, right? This is something, so it makes this documentary very interesting. There's a lot to talk about. And I'm going to introduce myself and then our guest. My name is Juliana. I am an anthropologist and co-founder of a feminist organization called Siete Polas. I am specializing sort of in medical anthropology. I've been working in healthcare consulting for a couple of years now. So of course, this documentary is like the perfect combination of my two big interests, which are women, gender equality, and healthcare, right? And with me, I have the pleasure to introduce and to talk to Caroline Jones. Caroline Jones is the director of this documentary that we are going to discuss, which is called In Case of Emergency. A really interesting and very catchy title. Caroline, I understand that you have been dedicated as ethnographer and documentarist to generating awareness about what is going on in the healthcare system. All these actors, dynamics, relationships, generating awareness, because even though this is not something that maybe we like to think about in our daily lives, hospitals and emergency departments, it's something that we want to avoid. So it's really important, the work Caroline has done to generate awareness about a very important system that all of us need to be aware about, right? And in this recent documentary, In Case of Emergency, she and the producer, Lisa Frank, are precisely illustrating the story of the nurse in the emergency department. And this is perhaps the first question I'd like to discuss with Caroline, and then I'll just let you talk about and share your experience, and it's your motivation. You've been working in like showing what's going on in the healthcare system throughout your career. What took you to sort of understand and show what was going on with nurses, and specifically the nurses in the emergency departments? That would be the first question.
Well, first of all, this is great to be with you. Juliana, I'm so glad I get to talk to you today, because I think a lot of our heart lies in the same place. And so it's a really interesting opportunity for me to talk about this work. I'm glad you mentioned Lisa Frank, because I love working with another woman, and we've done all of this work over the last 12 years together that's been focused on the healthcare system. You know, my background is a photographer, and that's how I got into filmmaking, was through that door of still photography. But several years ago, many years ago now, I had breast cancer, and I went through the entire process of, you know, the surgeries and the radiation, and then it came time for my chemotherapy. And I was really scared. And I ended up having this nurse walk in the room who just had the most emotional intelligence of anyone I'd come across in my life. And she just had this way of making it all okay. And not just once, but every time I went back for my chemotherapy, I saw her. And, you know, you have like two choices in a moment like that. You can either kind of go down a dark hole and get depressed, or someone can drag you out of it. And my daughter was 10 years old, and I'm married, and I wanted to be there for my husband. And somehow this woman did this for me. She got me through it with a certain amount of grace and humor and everything else. And the funny thing is you don't tend to thank that person properly when you're in that moment. You know, you finish your treatment and you're like, I'm out of here. You know, as well as we knew each other, I didn't think, well, I'm going to call her up and have lunch together. So I just kind of, you know, left and got on with my life and put it all behind me. And so a few years later, I was asked to do a book about nurses. And I thought, you know, it was such an interesting type of person to me that has that much knowledge about people and humanity and how to kind of get under your skin. And it's so smart. And I was really impressed with it. So I jumped on the opportunity to make a book, and Lisa produced that book with me. And it began this journey. And that was in 2011. And I went all across the country and I interviewed nurses from all walks of life. And I got possessed by, what's the DNA of a nurse? Are you born this way? Is it learned behavior? How can you be non-judgmental every day, day in and day out? I just got really fascinated at the idea of looking at issues in our country through this particular lens, because it's completely non-political, it's non-judgmental, and it's just about human beings working with other human beings. So it captured my heart. I did the first film, was called The American Nurse. I followed 5 nurses in that one. And then I got really interested in the end of life issues. So with technology where it is today, I think it's very complicated what goes on at the end of life. And I wanted to explore that. So we followed 8 patients dealing with life-threatening illnesses. And then that led me to In Case of Emergency. And I wanted to make this film because, first of all, our society is reflected in our emergency rooms. What's going on with people all across the world you land in the emergency department to try to fix it or solve it or make it better or make you better. So it's really a mirror of our society. It's a reflection of where we are and what the issues are. And I wanted to meet the people who pick us up at that moment. It's like the worst day of your life to go to the emergency room. Nobody wants to be there. It's horrible. So I was already so interested in nurses, but I wanted to know, who are these people that are able, amidst the chaos that is an emergency room, how are they able to kind of reach through that chaos and touch us and make us feel better and let us know something about who we are? So that's basically what brought me to it.
That's perfect. It's so interesting. It's also like you said, really interesting to me, because what I mentioned at the beginning, despite the fact that you've obviously been following the American Nurse, we feel the same way in Colombia. It's a very similar dynamic, what is going on here. And you mentioned something when we knew each other like a couple of months ago, that there might be such a thing as like a universal experience of a nurse. So there's something I'd like to make like emphasize about what you just mentioned, which I loved about the documentary. Everyone here, please watch the documentary. It's very inspirational, and it's the fact that there are several, but maybe let's start discussing this emotional intelligence, which you mentioned. I work very often with healthcare professionals and specialists, no? These the super wow doctors that have studied a lot, that have a lot of experience, and there is a general awareness about the importance of like the soft skills in healthcare. Everybody talks about it. No, that they know they need to learn how to communicate with the patient, support the patient in very difficult times, and the families as well. But it's still the same thing about the nurse being like the primary actor that is expressing these emotional intelligence and the soft skills, no, and the empathy. And here is what I wanted to mention. And this is really important for Colombians as well, and it's how nurses are going to save lives indiscriminately, right? I don't care about your political orientation. No, I don't care how you got here. I'm going to try to save you, which is a refreshing, no, very hopeful approach to polarized societies, which I think the like American society has become polarized, maybe more dramatically over the past years in Colombia as well. So this is something I'd like to highlight of the documentary, and also this very it sounds like a really simple, very dumb thing to say, but the importance of listening to the patient. That's also something that the nurses say throughout the documentary. Like sometimes the patient just needs to be heard. They want to tell their story, and it's something that seems so easy, and yet we haven't been able to standardize it in how we treat and how we care for these patients, right? What do you think about these like soft skills, this more human approach to treatment?
You know, it kind of blows my mind that we call them soft skills. And I know that we do, that's how it's always referred to. But somewhere along the line, I think we're going to have to come to the realization that we need doctors and we need nurses. We also need social workers and we need physical therapists and we need everybody else. But the core team is a doctor who, if you've got something wrong with your heart or your elbow or your knee, you want someone who spends their whole life concentrating on that part of your body. And I applaud that. They're heroes and they are treated like heroes. But for some reason, we always remember the names of our doctors and hardly any of us remember the names of our nurses. And I think it's very telling, this thing. And I don't mean just here in America, I think everywhere humanity has kind of in so many ways lost touch. And I don't know whether it's because of technology or I don't know what it is, but we've lost touch with how important those skills are. And it's documented that the way a nurse can walk in the room and she can lower your blood pressure. She can make your heart stop beating so fast. She can ease whatever pain is going on by giving you some direction and feeling that will calm you down. I've watched nurses like bring down the temperature in the whole room in just a few sentences. And it's because they look at the whole picture. The doctor's really good at looking at the specific picture, but one person in that room needs to be able to look around and see everything that's affecting you. And that's a nurse. So, and they're assessing all the time. They're so smart and people don't realize it, but they're looking at your skin color. They're looking at your skin. They're kind of feeling whether you're clammy or not. They're seeing who's with you. Did this person, especially in the emergency room, did this person come in with a loved one that's going to make this situation better or make the situation worse? Do they have support at home? There are 1,000 things that go through their minds. And it all just adds up to this intelligence about people. And I don't know why we don't value it more than we do, and why it is a soft skill and not a really critical skill that we value and honestly pay what they should be getting paid and give them the respect that I believe they deserve.
And it must be something about like since like the like university, like med school, maybe it's about strengthening, and this is part of your core, this connection and this communication with patients. Here, oh, just before we move on, I'd like to tell everyone that is connected that you can please send us your questions and comments, especially if you have comments about like what goes on in Colombia with nurses and urgencias, emergency departments. It would be really interesting to like maybe identify similarities and differences if you have direct experience, also questions, and also remember that we are transmitting in English through YouTube and in Spanish through Facebook, just so you want to, in case you want to switch languages. So Caroline, maybe it's something to further discuss. This is let's talk about like a reality, which is like the nurses are usually women. It's a very feminized figure in at least from what I know, Western culture at least. And this is not a coincidence. That's something that we as feminists always try to generate awareness. No, it's about not taking things for granted. Why are some jobs more feminized than others? And because there are consequences about this. As you said, maybe the salaries that we pay nurses are not as just. It should be maybe the gap should be less. Do you think this has to do with the fact that nursing is seen as like a women's job, and maybe that's why it's not like as glorified in society? What do you think about the female nurse?
You bet I think that. I mean, I believe that with all my heart. And I don't know why we're dismissive of women as teachers and nurses. I really don't. There is this certain taking for granted dismissiveness that happens. And I think it's because it's so hard to define these skills. You know, we're talking about really sensitive human things that I think as a society, we don't necessarily cherish anymore. And so that's really the problem. I don't think it's specifically about nurses as much as just women in general and what they bring to the table. I think it's getting better, and that's why I do the work that I do. And that's one of the reasons why I've focused the last decade of my life on showing these remarkable people that have literally changed how I look at the world, and made my life richer. And I keep thinking, if people could see that, and if people could really understand how wonderful it is to care for another human being, that these nurses, you know, people always say this thing to nurses about, oh, well, did you not quite make medical school? Or did you want to be a doctor, but you didn't make it, so you're a nurse? They hear this all the time, even from their families, like, oh, I wish you'd been a doctor. But nurses, and I've now interviewed hundreds, they choose to be a nurse. They choose to be a nurse because they want the human contact. They know they can make an impact. And they're not out for the glory of it. They're out for the purpose of it. And I tell you, one thing I've learned, this group of people who do this work have more purpose in every single day of their life than any other people I've ever met in my life. They're nurses all day long, every day, 7 days a week, 24/7. You don't just turn it off when you leave. And they have a reason for living. I've met nurses, you know, you don't just stop being a nurse or retire at 65. I've met nurses that just have it in their blood. And I find that they have so much joy in life. I swear, if I had to do my whole life over again, I would choose this profession because it's so incredibly rewarding. It may not be rewarding financially, and it may not be rewarding in terms of how much respect you get, but they know what they're doing, and they know the difference that they make every single day. And let's face it, eventually, every single one of us will need a nurse. And you'll be happy if you get a good one. And if she's been, or he, I think 7% are men. If you get a nurse that's really good at what they do, it's going to make a huge difference. So I think we have to just focus on it.
Okay, no, that's great. And that's something that I saw in the documentary when the nurses were explaining what they do. And it's this like authenticity. Like, I like to be here. This is rewarding. No, it's so gratifying to make patients feel better. So I could see that in the interviews, which really connected me with what I was watching and like what they were saying. You mentioned something, and it's the male nurse, and maybe like what do you think? Can you conclude, or what takeaway do you have about men that they genuinely want to be nurses? Like, no, it's not because I failed med school or whatever. no,
Right.
this is where I want to be. Is there some sort of like, I don't know, social consequences, especially for the male nurse? I'm trying to think. I haven't had the chance to work with this actor in Colombia. Male nurses, most of the ones I have encountered in fieldwork are women. So I'd like to ask you, what do you think about?
You know, I think there's still a bit of a social stigma, and it will stay there probably forever. But I think that it takes a really strong guy to go into this field because it's questioned all the time. I met a lot of men in the emergency department. Emergency department nursing is a completely different animal. I think it is a different skill set, and I think that men are more maybe comfortable in that environment, but the men and the women work together and they both are dealing with people in such a beautiful way. I'm thinking in particular about a nurse that I met in Detroit, Robbie, who I followed through a couple of night shifts in Detroit because I wanted to capture what happens when someone comes in and they've been shot. And we had an opportunity to watch him care for a patient who had taken a bullet. And, you know, he was just as compassionate and empathetic as the women, but it was a different kind of relationship. You know, it was just a little bit different. And I think we have such a need to have men in this. Look, we all like to be cared for by someone who is like us. So as women, I think we gravitate towards women caring for us. And as men, sometimes you're more comfortable having a guy care for you. And that's just life. And so it's great to have men be interested in this and follow this track. We need them. I think also, and I don't know if, I think this is a global issue, but patients, the obesity issue in our country is really a big problem. And so the patients are just physically more challenging for a lot of people to care for. And so it's sometimes it's just good to have, not that women aren't strong, but to have an extra set of hands, and be able to cope with some of those issues as well.
Okay, that's great. Yes, to have like diversity in teams, that's always better in every context to have
Yeah.
people with different skills and backgrounds. And also, that's just something I wanted to mention here. We're receiving some comments from Facebook and YouTube. So we have people connected from Cali in Colombia, del Plata in Argentina, Bogotá also in Colombia, Granada, which is also in Colombia. So just thank you everyone for watching. We have a comment that says, salvar vidas es lo más hermoso, estar con pacientes es único. So saving lives is a beautiful thing, right? And being with patients is, and generating this connection with patients is sort of like undescribable, like being there, no? So this is something that nurses, it's nice to listen to them. And also someone mentioned from that in Colombia, we have very excellent male nurses, enfermeros. So that's also good to know. Would be really interesting to talk to them. I hope I can do so eventually in one of my projects. Here it says, felicitación. So congratulations to all of the healthcare professionals. Thank you for your patience, your love, and in your work. So yes, like a recognition, being grateful for all of these people that work in the healthcare system. So, this is also a really interesting issue, and it's something that you've mentioned, Caroline, in your interventions. And it's let's talk about the skill set of the nurse, which is again, I'm not saying it's better or less better than the skill set of a really specialized specialist, no, like because right now you not only specialize in something, but you do like another specialization, another, and no, like knowledge is becoming very, very narrow because there's so much to know. So if you're an expert, if you want to become an expert in a field, you need to choose like a very specific part of the field. But this is not so in the case of nurses. It's a little bit more of maybe the opposite, and specifically the nurses that are in the emergency departments where everything can go on. So the knowledge they need to have is different. They need to know maybe a little bit of everything. I think in the documentary they talk about the jack of all trades, which is an American expression. I don't know if you have a direct translation in Colombia, but like a todero, everything. We do everything. We do whatever is necessary. We don't know what's coming, no. So maybe this is like a really interesting thing, no, to like question and not say like one type of knowledge is better than the other, but different. We need different people with different know-hows in different moments in in care and in healthcare, no? And also relating to regarding the knowledge of the nurse, the nurses mentioned something in the documentary, which is understanding pain and understanding the pain skills, no? How pain, it is not just this like a quantitative scale. Yes, it's like a guide, and we need it, and it's very revealing, but also it means ultimately truly understanding the patient and pain, not just physically, but maybe in general, no? So would you like to say something regarding this ability to like to first maybe the jack of all trades, the toleros, but also not truly understanding what is going on with this person holistically, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you went here, because I think sometimes, and I think knowledge is very much like this. As you said, we put on blinders and we become specialists in something. And there are a lot of specialists in medicine. We need someone that has a global perspective. We need someone who just can pull back and look at that entire human being and get a sense of what's going on. I'll give you an example in the emergency room. There was a moment during In Case of Emergency where a woman came in who had been mauled by pit bulls. Two pit bulls had attacked her. I mean, and this is a case in point. We saw everything. I mean, everything happens in the emergency department, from birth to death and everything in between. So jack of all trades, you bet they are. They know, just dealing with all of these different issues every day, I think gives them a knowledge about just how to help people in a better way. But anyway, so this woman comes in, and the emergency department can be just this mass of people who all seem to know what they're doing. But as an outsider witnessing, I'm wondering why they're not running into each other, because someone's taking blood over here and someone's taking blood over there and someone's putting a tourniquet on here. And they're just maybe 20, 25 people around this woman who had been attacked by these dogs. And I'm looking at her and looking at this whole scene and thinking, you're not sure she's going to make it, right? And people, they're so frantic. And then I hear this nurse, and I watch her go over, and she takes her by the hand, and she says, "Hey, Stephanie, we've got you. We've got you. We're right here. We've got you." And I watched Stephanie's face like connect. It was the first connection she'd had since she'd gone through those doors. And I just thought, in the midst of this mayhem, for anybody to have the wherewithal to take a moment and connect with the human being who they're trying to save her life. I mean, there's just so much going on, but it was so important to connect. And I thought, that's a gift. That's a gift to be able to do that. I really, really admire that. And it's this kind of like global pullback perspective of, oh yes, this is a human being we're treating here. And she must be really scared because there's an awful lot going on around her. I was very, very impressed with that. And I started looking for these moments because we would be in these situations of mayhem, and I would watch a nurse come and give someone a sip of water, just do one small gesture that was so meaningful and so beautiful. And I kept thinking it was like crystallized humanity in the middle of the emergency department amidst all of this chaos. So it was beautiful to watch. As far as the pain conversation goes, this is complicated because we're not all, we all experience pain in a different way, and there are all different kinds of pain, and nurses have to learn how to judge that. If a patient's coming into the emergency department, the nurses do triage, and so they're the ones that sit down and have to figure out, is this patient going to die in 10 minutes if I don't get him in the back? Or how much pain are they really in? They have to kind of weigh everything out and measure it and go and listen very carefully to what the patient is saying and who's with the patient and how they're acting and take it all in. And I think that, and I felt this way too, that so many of us think that nurses take our temperature, take our blood pressure, hold our hand, make us feel better. They have no idea the extent of the education nurses have, which is vast. And I had to be in the hills of Kentucky watching a nurse care for a patient that no one else could get to really see how autonomous nurses can be, how much the extent of their knowledge lets them help heal someone. And it's really stunning. So I think there's just so much that we don't recognize. And because of those soft skills we were talking about, we're dismissive. And it's unfortunate. We shouldn't be, because there's just a vast amount of knowledge there.
No, that's so many things you mentioned that I'd like to discuss. That was also something that caught my attention while watching the documentary, and it's these dramatic scenes when there's like a group of nurses around the patient and all of them are doing their own thing. It's like super coordinated, like it's totally like a harmonized, no, and with like amidst the chaos, there's like always one, or there's always this very human gesture, which you mentioned, which could be the glass of water, could be words of encouragement, could be holding a hand. No, so being able to do that, like saving your life, but also like no, this is a person, like, hey, look at me in the eye, no, we're in this together. That's amazing, and that's also something that I thought was very good about the documentary. Great. Okay, so I'm also looking at more topics. There's again a lot to discuss. So, but please, if anyone's watching and you have any questions or comments, please, by all means, it would be really interesting to have this sort of discussion. There's like a very obvious topic, I guess, or something that we have to address, Caroline, and it's COVID-19. No, because this is something that it was coincidental, the fact that you were filming the documentary and the pandemic started. Nobody could have like anticipated that.
No.
So this question has like two parts, no? What was like your experience filming the documentary with COVID? Like what happened? What happened to the production of the documentary? But maybe also perhaps, do you think that maybe due to COVID, we're now more aware about the importance of the nurse? Did this like, was this like a wake-up call? Or do you think that human beings are like forgetful and we'll just get over it and move on with their lives? What do you think is going to happen here onwards?
Well, okay, let me answer the first part first. We had been filming for 2 years when COVID hit. We were pretty much finished with the film. We were going to release it in March of 2020. And so we were just on the verge. The edit was finished. We'd mixed the sound. We were all ready to go. And then COVID hit. And, I wasn't sure where it was going to go or what was going to happen at that stage of the game, but I knew we needed to be there. And I knew that we had to hold the film back to see what was going to happen, because if it was what it looked like it was going to be, we needed to include it. This was a film about the emergency department. So we held it back, thank heavens. And I went back to, there's usually a nurse that I really connect with in a project and that kind of rises to the surface that I follow more than any other nurse because we have a connection. And in this film, it was a woman named Kathleen Robinson. And Kathleen was like, she was like documentary heaven because she loves what she does and she's so good at it. And she was so open to letting me follow her. And I watched her work. I watched her under so many circumstances. She was working at an ED in Paterson, New Jersey. And it's like the third busiest emergency department in the United States. So it was lively in there. And I saw her deal with all kinds of things. So when COVID hit, I was in New York City and she was there. So it was kind of close. And I thought, well, let's try to get into that hospital and capture what was going on. It was really hard to get in. There wasn't enough PPE for the people working at the hospital, let alone letting my team in. And I work very closely. It was just 3 of us. I have a wonderful cameraman named Jaka Vincek that I've worked with for the last 12 years. And then there's Lisa Frank. Lisa does the sound and she's a producer. And then there's me. And so the 3 of us needed to get permission to get in there and not interfere with what was going on, but just try to capture it. And so we were allowed to follow Kathleen. And I mean, honestly, you know, you just wanted to spend the whole day crying. It was the interviews were heartbreaking. The conversation had gone from somewhat, you know, what had become normal for me in emergency department. All of a sudden, we're seeing body bags everywhere, and people are talking about contamination, and you could just see that there was an enormous weight on everybody's shoulders, and it was just too much to be able to deal with. And then there was the PPE. So one of the things I love about making this work is nursing is so intimate. You know, you get in there and there's all of this touch and hugs and skin on skin and eye contact and all these really intimate moments with patients. And I love getting in there and capturing all that. Well, now there are like 13 layers of plastic between the nurse and the patient, all these shields and stuff. And it was so much harder for the nurses to connect to the patients. And it was heartbreaking when they did, and just really tough to capture and watch without kind of going in, like taking the whole audience into a deep hole. I always want to make work that isn't pessimistic or depressing. I wanted to show the strength of the human spirit in this film. I wanted, you know, the nurses didn't give up. They were in there every day, still dealing, and whether they had children at home or families that they were scared to go home to because they were afraid of giving everybody COVID, but they still like soldiered on. I don't know how much it cost them personally, and that jury is out, because the emotional toll that COVID has taken on the entire healthcare community, I don't think we know yet. But I hope, with every ounce of hope I've got, that we can look at nurses a little differently after this, and not just think of them as someone that we want to, you know, here, I don't know what happened there, but here at 7 o'clock at night in the beginning, everybody was hanging out their windows and banging on their pots and pans and thanking the healthcare workers. I was out there with them. And, you know, the feeling was so like we're all in this together kind of thing. And so it started off there, and then people sending all kinds of gifts to hospitals to, you know, help the nurses get through it all. And so there was a lot of energy there. But that, and then you have a lot of images of nurses holding iPads for patients who were dying and couldn't be with their families. And all of those are wonderful things. But the nurses innovated during this period like you would not believe. They turned waiting rooms into treatment rooms in a heartbeat when they had to. They did so much to save lives. And I think that story got lost a little bit with all of the iPads and the donuts and the pizzas and everything that was sent to the nurses. And I think maybe we missed a little bit of the point of what they were really able to accomplish and what we ask of them.
Okay, wow. So many interesting things. So what you mentioned about the human touch, right? The human touch involved in nursing, and layers of plastic, and this like a sort of no, like completely covered, and the face, and because in the documentary they talk a lot about the importance of the eye contact. So everything was lost, but also the resilience, the spirit, and that's something I'd also like to mention about the documentary. It's not sad, it's not tragic, it's not like, ooh, no, this is horrible. I think you make a great point to say things are hard, but we can get through this. It is very rewarding. We have really, really sad and dramatic days, but we also have a lot of happy moments, and that is the energy of the documentary. When I watched it with my family, and we were a little bit like, is this going to be like horrible? Like, are we going? I watched it at night also, so but no, the feeling was good to see like how happy these nurses were at the end of the day.
Thank you for that. There are a lot of things that I saw that I didn't want to put into the film because I didn't just want to turn people off to, you know, it's the emergency room, for heaven's sake. So stuff happens, but it wasn't about, this film wasn't about that. It was really about these incredible people who are able to, they put aside so much They put aside all politics. They put aside any kind of judgment. They don't care how you got there or what you did to get there. They just care for you. I don't think I've ever seen anything so beautiful in my life as just that there are people among us. And I don't have this quality. I would like to have it. I hope that I've been hanging around nurses now for 12 years, so I kind of hope I develop it. But this ability to just accept another human being for who they are and care for them and maybe make a difference to change things. You know, I was thinking about your work, and I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Farmer, who was a medical anthropologist. So he passed away recently, which the world lost a treasure there, to be sure. But he talked a lot about social medicine, how we can't not look at all of these ills as we have to look at them as social ills, because to cure someone and then send them back into the very situation that prompted the disease in the first place doesn't get us anywhere. And in the emergency department, they talk a lot about the revolving door. So people coming in because they've overdosed or, you know, whatever the occasion is that brought them in. And then you do everything you can, and then you put them back out on the street, and then you end up seeing them again. And so I think there are certain people among us who are able to help stop that cycle, that are really interested in just saying the right thing to someone at the right time, to say, you know, I can get you help. Or I know where you can go, that you can talk to somebody about this. And I think nurses are in a really unique position to be able to help stop that revolving door. And we really need that to happen. There aren't enough Paul Farmers in the world. He was a doctor, and I wish that we had more people that looked at life the way he did, but that I think he inspired an awful lot of folks.
Okay, no, that's we're talking. Paul Farmer is he's a professor of medical anthropology. He has written a lot about like this more human social side to different conditions, diseases. I think his most recent book is about the Ebola crisis in Africa, and it's also resonates perfectly with the crisis that we all lived in during COVID. No, when there's like a pandemic or an epidemic, and then how these ultimately are social phenomena. Know how it like the consequences of a pandemic and an epidemic are going to be directly related to decision makers, how countries decide to handle the crisis, and all these stakeholders, even pharmaceutical companies or organizations. So wow, yes, this is like a really big field. Just to start closing, Caroline, I think my biggest takeaway about the documentary is what you already mentioned at the beginning of the talk. And it's we usually think about the emergency department as this really disconnected, really exceptional part of our lives. We don't want to be there. We go there where things are bad. We have this really negative perception about it. And what I learned in your documentary and talking to you is how society's problems are reflected there. Because who lands in the emergency department, and this happens in Colombia. Domestic violence. There's gun violence, or there's substance abuse. This is not just about the state, but in general. And we can totally think about the situation in Colombia as well. How like we've never thought about discussing like current events with nurses at emergency departments, and they sure have a very interesting input, probably. So that's, I think, my biggest takeaway, and it was really nice to talk to you once again. I'm going to encourage everyone to please send us questions or comments. I am going to read more comments. There's Aura is a nurse in Santa Marta, a coastal city here in Colombia. She says it's a really interesting discussion. So yes, I do hope a lot of nurses are watching, and please let us know if you are. Someone else, John, says that they have a very good training for nurses in the States. Know that this is helping improve the healthcare system. So something that maybe nurses here in Colombia look up to might be like the way nurses are being trained, which is also something that appears in the documentary, how they're always learning, because this is not something congratulations, there's everything you need to know as a nurse. No, they're
Right.
learning all the time. And I saw in the documentary this like attitude and disposition to learn. Like, yes, please tell me more. Like, I want to become better. I want to gain better skills. Here Janice says, I think that being a nurse is be the best person of yourself for your patients. No, not just about a lot of like medical knowledge, but also like be human. No, be yourself.
Yeah.
And this is also something that it totally connects with the documentary. I don't know, just maybe to start closing off, Caroline, is there maybe something you'd like to say to the audience, considering we're like Colombia, maybe another country? I don't know how much you know about Colombia or the healthcare system, but anything maybe you'd like to know, or to say to Latin America, considering there are also maybe the people from other countries here in the region. Like, is there anything you'd like to say?
I think it's universal. My feeling is that if we could value one another, if we could learn more from nurses, bring them into every conversation. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. Nurses have seen something that they have a very great idea of what's going on in their communities and in society in general. And so inviting them to the conversation is such an important thing for everybody to do. If you're lucky, if you have a nurse in your world, it's a very insulated, and I think this is probably true everywhere, that it's kind of an insulated profession to choose, because who wants to hear about what a nurse went through that day at the dinner table? It's like nobody asks them, what was your day like? Because it's tough stuff. And so then they don't talk because it's not pleasant. And then we don't ask questions because we don't know what questions to ask. And so they get more insulated, and then we don't reach out and use this great wisdom that they have. I just, one last story, because I think that the emergency department offers a bridge between society, between the local community and the hospital. You've got people in the hospital that need to be cared for, going back out into the community, and somehow you want to change that dynamic, right? And nurses are in a perfect spot to do it. So one quick story. When I was in Detroit, there was a woman named Cheryl Hurst who was an emergency room nurse, and she was working with the gunshot victim who came in that night. But I got to talking to her because she said, when I'm not here, I'm involved in an anti-violence program, and I go into the community and I talk to students at schools about anti-violence, how to avoid violence. And she said, tomorrow I'm bringing some students to the emergency department, and I'm going to give them kind of a lecture. So I watched her bring about, I don't know, maybe a dozen students of high school age into the emergency department to talk about what happens when you got shot with a bullet. Now, teenagers are tough to talk to, right? And it could have been a tough crowd. But she was so non-judgmental about it. She wasn't saying guns are good, guns are bad, don't join a gang. She wasn't doing any of that. She was just saying, this is what happens to the human body when a bullet pierces the skin. This is what happens when you come into the emergency department and you've been shot. Those students were there for about an hour and a half, and she went through everything, and it was very sensible and it was unemotional. And those students were riveted. They were hanging on to every word. And at the end of it, I watched so many of them come up to her and say, can I talk to you about a story? Can I tell you about my brother or my neighbor or somebody that I lost who got shot? And it opened a dialogue. And I thought, that nurse that day, and I just caught her for 1 hour and a half in one of her days, she possibly changed the trajectory of some lives that afternoon. And this is what they can do. And this is a place where we can work with nurses and give them an opportunity to have a voice in our community, because they're in a unique position to help us. And that's how I feel about nurses and the role that they play everywhere. They know something nobody else knows, and we need to access that.
No, that's totally what's I'm thinking why medical knowledge is like a very reserved, like only a few can access it, and the importance about talking and not just like in this context, but in general, no. This is a very important thing to anthropologists always ask. People are probably going to be grateful if you ask them like what do you do, what was interesting about your day.
Yeah.
So maybe encouraging this maybe moments to share. I think, and for young people, definitely, I think that would be like an excellent opportunity for nurses here to generate awareness about what they do and inspiring, which happens to me as an anthropologist. There's a lot of misconceptions as well about the discipline, and I love to have the chance to talk to young people like, hey, no, this is different. So something might probably happen as well with the nurses. Caroline, I think there are no more questions. I think it's going to be about an hour. So once again, thank you everyone that joined us. Thank you for your comments. I'm very glad that you found it interesting because, as I said, there's a lot of parallels between like what goes on in Colombia with nurses and what the documentary is showing about nurses in the States. Caroline, your job is admirable. Your career specializing in ethnography and documentary within healthcare is very interesting. So much to say, so many actors, so many contexts to research. So I wish you the best
Thank
with your
you.
team to keep on generating awareness, because what you're doing is very important. And I hope it inspired someone here in our discussion to do something in Colombia as well, because there's a lot of opportunity to also to show what the nurses are doing in our system. Okay. So I think that would be it. I think we can end the event here.
Thank you,
And
Juliana. I just want to say thank you. What a joy to get to talk to you. And I'm so happy to be able to take these stories outside of the United States and make it a little bit broader conversation. So thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
okay, no, excellent, Carolyn. We'll stay in touch, and thank you the embassy for organizing the event. Not only this one about women in healthcare, but in general, talking about women in many different contexts. What a great way to commemorate the Women's Month. So thank you for the initiative, and well, I hope everyone has a good weekend. And thanks again for joining us.